What drink do you give to a sick lemon? Lemonade. But the various food banks across the United States, which are providing crucial support to the less fortunate, including lemons and aid, certainly need more support from state governments. Some even say that they should be reclassified as public safety providers. But what does this mean? According to the World Food Program just 17 hours ago, public safety providers are usually receiving more support from the state and are normally exempt from federal spending cuts. And as Feeding America notes in a report on April 17th of 2026, nearly 53 million Americans visited a food bank last year. As more and more as more and more Americans are living paycheck to paycheck and the federal government continues to cut welfare and food aid, it becomes crucial for state governments to ask today's all-important question for the crucially increasing percentage of Americans who fall into this category. Do social safety nets, such as food banks, need to be reclassified as public safety providers by states? And the answer to this question is undoubtedly yes. Firstly, because they are usually on the front lines of natural disasters. Secondly, because state support will likely make them far more effective. And lastly, because they relieve pressure on the healthcare system. But first, I can't even get help from a food bank. They say I'm 2 tomato tins and a banana overdrawn. But but food banks are usually on the front lines of natural disasters. According to this California Association of Food Banks on May 11th of 2026, food banks, such as during Hurricane Katrina and so on, provided life-saving food aid to families that had lost everything in the natural disaster and floods. Moreover, the American Red Cross notes on May 16th of 2026 that declaring food banks public safety providers would drastically minimize the negative impacts of natural disasters. Therefore, food banks should undoubtedly be reclassified as public safety providers due to the fact that they are extremely important in natural disaster response. However, reclassifying them would make them far more effective even outside of natural disasters, which brings me to the second reason why state governments must immediately reclassify food banks. If you end up cutting welfare, as the Trump administration is doing, you'll end up paying for it in the form of prisons and dead people. But supporting people who are struggling with food security in a first world country is extremely important. According to Deutsche Welle on May 19th of 2026, food banks in both Germany and the United States face significant challenges, including infrastructure issues and supply bottlenecks. And as France 24 further extrapolates just 15 hours ago, New York's Mayor Zoran Mamdani has dramatically increased support for food banks and has protected the city's nearly 273,000 recipients of SNAP benefits from federal tax cuts pushed for by the Trump administration. Therefore, this has likely saved thousands of lives, or at least prevented several people from developing health issues. Therefore, the Therefore, state governments should undoubtedly reclassify food banks as public safety providers because they face significant shortages in their valuable mission of delivering food to those nearly 58 million Americans, as I stated at the beginning of my speech. However, increasing food aid will also increase support, or rather decrease the strain on our healthcare system. Which brings me to the third and final reason why states should reclassify food banks. Why did the sick man not get the joke? It flew over his head. But if he just had access to some healthy food, which is a human right, he would probably not be sick. According to the Mayo Health Clinic on April 9th of 2026, the low quality of food is almost always an indicator of poor health outcomes. And notes PBS News notes on May 15th of 2026 that families in poverty usually get fast food at least once every week, further weakening their health outcomes. Therefore, simply by strengthening food banks and other providers of free food, such as SNAP benefits, the government will dramatically reduce the strain on our healthcare system and likely improve the financial standing of millions of less fortunate families due to the fact that they have to pay less for healthcare and food. Taking a step back, lemons might need lemonade, but food banks certainly need help from state governments if they are to more effectively fulfill their mission. State governments should undoubtedly reclassify food banks as public safety providers for three main reasons. Firstly, they are usually on the front lines of natural disasters and recognizing them as public safety providers because they are in fact improving the safety of communities that have been destroyed by natural disasters would make them far more effective in responding to these incidents. Secondly, food banks and other providers of food banks and other providers of crucial food aid to communities face significant challenges face significant challenges related to infrastructure when attempting to fulfill their noble quest. And lastly, providing food aid to families will dramatically improve healthcare outcomes for lower income families, meaning that the government will ultimately have to spend less on healthcare and lift millions of families out of poverty. Thank you.